Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first Model Parliament podcast, where we talk to people that work in government and politics to hear about their insights and experiences. My name is Miguel, and that's my co-host Selma, and I'd like to welcome our guest, Ziyaad Vahed. Thank you so much for coming, and we really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us and to teach and share about your experiences with our student community. And to start off with, why don't you tell us about your job title and where you work, Mr. Vahed?
Yeah, sure. First of all, thanks for the opportunity. I'm really excited to be here. I always appreciate the time to be able to share what I do with particularly with people starting off in their careers. So that's really great and really exciting for me as well. So right now I'm the director of the Child Development Specialized Services branch, which is in the Ministry of Children, Community, and Social Services. So I lead a branch of individuals that work on public policy. Specifically in this case, when it comes to children with special needs and also with early intervention programs across the whole province. So we oversee a lot of different programs and agencies that work in this space. We provide them policy and we also we fund them as well. So that's ultimately the work of this branch, but I've been involved in many different parts of the Ontario Public Service over the last 20 years.
That's well, you have plenty of information that we'd love to dissect a bit, if you don't
Yeah.
mind. I think Selma had a question.
Yes. Okay, so could you start telling us about your career journey and starting with your graduation from UTM, since you have the same educational background as we do right now?
Yeah, sure. So I went to University of Toronto, Mississauga campus many years ago. I graduated, it was like the late 90s, but I did political science and history. And in the downtown campus, I also did at OIZ, I did my Bachelor of Education, my Master's of Education. So that was my fields of study. So I kind of had a couple of options coming out of university. I was thinking about the teaching field and whether I wanted to become an educator. But then I also had an idea about getting into potentially getting into the public service. But it was actually during my time at UTM, I did a lot of volunteer work as a student, and I was very heavily kind of involved. And I would say that experience was a good experience because it put me in a position to right out of undergrad kind of apply for a position at downtown faculty of physical education and health. They were looking to do equity policy and they were looking for somebody who could assist them with that. And I don't know how I managed it now that I think back, but I applied for the position and made it through the interview process and actually was able to do kind of equity policy for a couple of years at that faculty, which was a great experience, but also kind of put me down also the path of policy development. So I could say for sure that my volunteer experience at UTM, as well as my education, helped me to get to my first job. And then from that first job, I started to think about kind of what would my next step be. And I was at that crossroads again, going to teaching, going to education, or try something in terms of the public side or political side of things. And that's when I discovered the Ontario internship program. And I said, hey, I'll give it a shot, see what happens, and made that decision after a couple of years of working and was able to kind of get through that process. And that program still exists in the Ontario government. It's a paid internship and it allows you to work with a ministry and get experience and then hopefully make your way into the public service. So that was my kind of journey coming out of UTM and coming formally into the public service.
I do have a question about that. So, what was the volunteering experiences that was really significant to you obtaining your first, job or opportunities?
Yeah, no, very good question. I think that at the time there was a lot of focus at the university on there was definitely a diversification of the student population happening at the campus. And so to the credit of the administration, they were really looking there thinking about how could we support these students that are coming into the campus based on their ethnic or religious or any other backgrounds that they were bringing to the campus. And so I was actually involved in the principal's diversity committee where we were giving advice to the principal, and I was like the student representative that sat on that committee. As well as I worked with the administration in terms of supporting some of the student orientation experiences and other committee work to provide advice back to the administration about what could be done. So through that experience, I think that was reflected well when I applied for the job, because they saw that I had already spent some time. And the committee actually was really interesting because it had students, it had faculty, it had staff members, it had people from the administration. So a good cross section of people that was kind of coming together and thinking together. And so I would say that UTM was really kind of ahead of its time in trying to make sure that it was meeting the needs of students back in the 1990s.
Oh, for sure. I mean, now these days, our campus is extremely diverse, and honestly, I really appreciate your contribution to it because I feel great on campus. I have so many friends from so many different places, so many different origins, and we're all having a splendid time for the most part. So,
That's great.
thank you, thank you for it. Right. So I have another question. What does it mean to be in public service and to do public policy?
Yeah, so that's something that it's a really important question, because I think that when people first think about government, they just really think about the political side. They really think about politicians. They think about that whole aspect of government. But the reality is that the political side is obviously important, but the political side is also transitory. Governments come and go, ministers come and go, MPPs come and go. But what really actually remains, and it's really a testament to our system of government, is that we have a nonpartisan public service in the Ontario government. I'm going to talk for the Ontario government, but we have the Ontario Public Service, and the Ontario Public Service remains in place despite the changes in government. So it doesn't change. And what that does is it creates a stability in the government. It creates a stability in terms of public policy and legislation, because you have people who have the information, the history from before, and are able to kind of provide advice based on that and continue things on. And so the role of the public service is to be nonpartisan, is to serve any government that shows up at the door, is to provide our best advice for that government. And that best advice is provided based on what it is they want to do. Obviously, they are the ones that provide direction because they've been elected by the people of Ontario. But at the same time, we also want to consider the actual what are the needs of the people of Ontario? What is in their best interest as we're providing or developing the advice for the political side. And so a lot of it is very much we're a professional public service. We spend time doing research. We get information. We talk to people on the ground and talk to stakeholders and find out kind of what's going on and what's their perspective on things. We try to take into consideration data and information that would guide our decision making, so that we're not just when we do provide advice to the political side, it's really set in a good amount of evidence-informed information and practice, so that they can make the best decision, hopefully in the context of what's best for Ontarians at the end of the day. And so we kind of have a dual relationship where we serve the current government, but we also want to keep in mind the people of Ontario as we do that, and their best interests as well as we go along. Now, ultimately, at the end of the day, and this is something that all public servants have to come to terms with, is that you're not the decision maker. You weren't politically elected by the people of Ontario. And so whatever the government chooses to do, that is their direction, and they are fulfilling the will of the people as they see it. And it's our role then, once we've given them that advice, to be able to take whatever direction they give us and be able to implement that, whatever that may be. So it's something that it's a very interesting relationship. But it's one that I think is really important because people should understand kind of the role of public service. Now, this applies across sectors. So you'll see the same thing in municipalities. You'll see the same thing in regional government. We tend to have this process where we have these nonpartisan public servants that remain, even if governments change from time to time.
So yeah, public service. You guys are always around and trying to give the best advice. So, I think there's not enough gratitude from the public, and there's a lot of celebrations when a certain party wins, but
Yeah.
I think it overshadows a bit of the contributions that nonpartisan people such as yourself and your different ministries do. So
It's a good point you brought up, in the sense that you also have to be comfortable with being anonymous, right? But that's anonymous in two ways. So it cuts both ways. First of all, you don't get any of the glory if things go right, but you don't get the blowback if things go wrong. Ultimately, the minister is responsible for everything that happens in the ministry. So if things go wrong, it's up to the minister to take the responsibility for it. They're not going to say, oh, this all went wrong because Ziyaad didn't do his job properly, right? They might say, oh, the public servants may have made a mistake, but I'm anonymized in the sense that my name is not on anything public. And so that's something, the nature of the public service is that we don't face that scrutiny that the political side would face, despite some of the decisions, some of the stuff that we might contribute in terms of their decisions. So another thing to keep in mind as well.
Has there been like a time where you specifically decided that you didn't want to get included in the partisan side, or you've just always been wanted to be in like public service overall because of your volunteer experiences, as you said?
Yeah, it's a very good question. It's like, do you want to be in the political side or not? I think over the time that I've done the work that I do and the governments that I've worked for, I think I've thought about it at times. It's like that'd be really interesting to be on the political side. But ultimately for myself decided that that wasn't the route I wanted to take in terms of my ability to serve the public. And I think for a number of reasons, again, the political side it's a totally different process, right? Like you have to get elected, which means you have to work with constituents, you have to go out there and meet people, you have to garner votes, you have to campaign, you have to do all that work to get elected to a position. And that if you do get elected to a position, you've got your job security is as much as 4 years. So basically, you know that 4 years' time, you're going to be again doing the same thing, coming forward, doing a campaign, and re-winning your job basically at the end of that 4 years. So the security is not always there. And in terms of your role on the political side as well, is that you can have a significant amount of positional power. You could be the premier, you could be a minister, but at the end of the day, you could also just be a backbench MPP, right? So you could be working to support your constituents, but may not actually have as much say in the actual decisions of the government that you are part of. You might be able to have a voice at the table, but ultimately the ministers and the premier pretty much have a lot of the decision-making authority that the rest of the party, the people in the party, don't have. So it's a different process altogether, different quote unquote game altogether. And there's also those MPPs that have political staffers that they will bring with them and to support them in their work as ministers. And that's another role that people can have. They can become a political staffer. But again, political staffers are not necessarily always based on kind of your competency level or your merits, but the fact that you were perhaps loyal to the campaign and that you helped the campaign win. But you may not be necessarily, sometimes campaign people that fulfill their roles. It might be like literally the first or second role they've had out of university that they're doing. So it's like it's not necessarily based on a competency-based process. It's based on more of like a loyalty-based process in that regard. It's not to say that if people are interested in that, then by all means they should do that, because public service, even at that level, is I know people often have a bad perspective about politicians. They have that lens, but working with politicians, I think, from my perspective, most of them want to do the right thing. They want to actually help people. In a lot of ways, it's a pretty thankless job. Like if anything goes wrong, somebody's always saying to you that it's going wrong. You don't get a lot of points where you're getting all this attention and a lot of kudos all the time. And you are kind of often in tough situations where you have to make decisions about who gets money or who gets resources. And there's a lot of people at the table saying that we should be the ones getting the money and the resources. So you're going to make somebody unhappy because some part of a sector is going to get some sort of support and another part is probably not going to get that support. And so there's always this competition in terms of looking for you to look their way. So I would say that you might disagree with the political ideologies of politicians, but more often than not, they're all just they all got into it because they really are trying to do something better for people.
Yeah. You're right. So your job is a bit more steady in that sense and faces less criticism for, I guess, part of the greater organization of things where everyone interacts, but you don't really get the criticism from that. Is that what
Yeah.
I'm getting?
Well, yeah. So first of all, we may hear criticism. So we are still interacting with stakeholders and Ontarians and families. And sometimes for some people, they can't differentiate between the Ontario Public Service and the politicians, right? So for them, it's almost the same thing. But more often than not, stakeholders who we work with regularly understand the differentiation, and they understand our role and they understand the politician's role. And so they will also be talking to both sides. They'll be talking to us and they'll be talking to the political representatives in order to move things along, move their agenda along. But yeah, stability is definitely a big part of the public service that, it's based on competency and merit, and that's how you interview for your job, and that's how you get your job. And it's stable as long as your performance remains good. You will continue on in the Ontario Public Service. And of course, we do have unions as well in the Ontario Public Service as well. So people are covered by that. Staff are covered by that as well.
Okay, so I guess that kind of leads to my next question. What's your current role, if you could tell us about how you built to that and the responsibilities it involves?
Yeah, for sure. So my role right now is a director, and I'm a director of a branch, and a branch has a typical branch in the Ontario Public Service will have the director, it'll have managers, a layer of managers, and then it'll have a layer of staff that those managers oversee. So the director's role is really supposed to be more of a strategic role. You're not a manager in the sense you're not managing the people directly. That's what the managers are there to do. Your role is to kind of look across at the work that's being done and kind of say, okay, how are things connecting across or not, or should they be? You're thinking about what's going to be happening in like 3, 6, 9 months from now. What do we need to do to plan now for that? You're also interfacing or working with your assistant deputy minister, who's the one I report to, as well as the deputy minister and the minister's office. So you're kind of understanding or trying to understand what the political side is looking for, and then helping your branch actually implement what the political side is looking for. So you're kind of that go between kind of what's going on above and then what needs to be done kind of below in terms of the work. And so the director is supposed to be a lot more of that strategic role. You're not supposed to get into the weeds and know all the details and attend all the meetings and read all the documents. That's what the staff are there for, and that's what the managers are there to do. So it's really looking at the broader picture and then thinking about how to accomplish the goals of the government within the context of the pieces on the ground, so to speak. So it's a really interesting and exciting position in the sense that it gives me the space to be able to kind of think strategically as opposed to trying to run everything. It can be a way that you can be pretty kind of, I would say the word is creative or innovative in terms of bringing forward good public policy. One thing about governments is that they have an idea about something, they want to do something, but they don't know all the details about how to actually do it. So they go, can you guys go off and we want this to happen? And that's fine. And I think a lot of quote unquote the devil's in the details, right? So we can still often accomplish what the government is looking for, but as I said before, do it in a way that is the best way to do it for Ontarians. And so I think as a director, my job is to be like, what is the best way we can do this that would actually help people on the ground and also make sure that the government gets what they want out of what they're expecting. So it's kind of being a bit more creative and innovative position. In terms of how I got here, I started as an Ontario internship in the Ontario internship program as an intern. Very quickly at the time, it was easy to morph into a full-time position, so I became a policy analyst fairly quickly. Did that for a number of years, moved into a team lead role, then moved into a manager role. And then I had some experience in Cabinet Office. Cabinet Office is an office that oversees all of government, which was a very amazing experience. And then from there, I was able to get into kind of this director level role that I'm in right now. So that's kind of been my journey. And that journey's been across a number of different ministries, which has also been an advantage, at least for me, because I've always kind of wanted to do different things and new things. And in the Ontario Public Service, we have like, I think it's like 26 or 28 ministries. They always kind of morph, like grow them or shrink them. But there's a lot of ministries, but ultimately you have the same employer. So if you move within the organization and you want to do different things, the opportunity is there, and that can be really exciting.
I'm going to ask, what are the challenges that come with this role? But I'm guessing, as you said, since you're the middle, it's probably talking with the both levels.
Yeah.
That would be the hardest part, I'm guessing.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a challenge. The other challenge is that you're always, as I kind of mentioned before, we're always working in an environment where there's not enough resources to do everything. So you have to be strategic about what you choose to do and what you choose to also advise the government to do. Because, particularly in the social services sector, the needs of people are huge. And in some cases have grown over time because of the pressures of like affordability, or housing, inflationary pressures. We came out of a pandemic. Like all of these things have had real effects in terms of people's ability to get what they need, the services they need, get to a livable wage and those types of things. But the reality is that we're always dealing with an environment where there's an expectation that there's only so much money that the Ontario government can spend, and any government for that matter, and that's based on the taxes they collect from people, and the understanding that people don't necessarily want to pay more and more taxes, even if there might be more and more service. They don't necessarily want to have that trade-off. So government's always kind of balancing off between how much money can we collect and then what do we use that money for if we've got a limited amount. So there's always that challenge. You can't kind of pretend that you're in an environment where you can spend as much money as you want, however you want. You're in an environment where there's constraints in terms of funding. And so how do you come up with the best way to move forward with the constraints that you have? And so that's always a challenge within the public service. You're always kind of thinking within that context. And you do have to go and make the case that if you want to do something new that's going to involve new money, then you're going to have to support your political side to make the case to say, hey, this is what we should spend more money on, and this is the reason why it's important to do that. And hope that you kind of are able to get more funding to do it. But even if you do get more funding, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get everything you want. So there's always, again, that limitation that within the government. And then there's also, there at times can be limitations in terms of even the type of capacity you have. So just because you might be given more work to do doesn't mean the government's willing to throw a whole lot more people into doing the work too. So they have to be conservative about the actual number of people within the Ontario Public Service. And I would say, I think the Ontario Public Service is about 68,000 people now. So to put things in perspective, that number has been about the same since I started in government. So in 2003. So I would say a lot of it has to do with efficiency, that the public service has had to remain efficient and do its job better, with even though the population of Ontario during that time has increased substantially since 2003, the public service itself has remained the same in terms of size. So from that perspective, there's also kind of a natural constraint about how much people resources the government is willing to put towards doing something as well. And it's not just like we can kind of turn on the tap and increase, the amount of people so that we can kind of do whatever we feel we need to do. So you have to, those are some of the challenges you deal with. And I think you have to, again, I talked that idea of being creative and innovative, because it's like, how do you do things within limitations that you have?
It's actually really mind-blowing that, since you started working in public service, that it hasn't, the amount of resources that you have and the amount of manpower that you have hasn't changed dramatically, even though our economy has grown, our population has grown a lot. That's very crazy to me.
Yeah, yeah. No, they kept a pretty tight lid on it, and that's been subsequent different governments with different political stripes have kind of kept a lid on it. Yeah.
Right. So I have a question about the different ministries you've worked in. So I'm seeing here that you've worked in the Ministry of Children, Community, and Social Services. You've worked in the Ministry of Citizenship and Multiculturalism and the Ministry of Education. Which one of those ministries was the most meaningful for you in terms of what you did or what you provided?
Yeah, I've also worked for the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs,
Nice.
and for a brief period, I've been at colleges and universities. What is most meaningful? I think I've had meaningful experiences throughout my career journey, and that's what's been, I think that's been a big blessing for me, is that kind of wherever I've gone, I felt that I've been able to do something that was meaningful. So the Ministry of Education, I was involved with, for instance, for some examples, the principal appraisal system for all schools in the province. So I developed that system, and that system actually still remains in place since I developed it in like 2008. So every principal still goes through the same appraisal process. I was in the Ministry of Education. I worked in 21st century innovation and learning. And so there's this big emphasis on how's technology being used in the classroom and how we're going to get more kids involved with technology, as well as what are the 21st century competencies that students need to have. So I helped to develop those 21st century competencies, and that set of competencies are still the set of competencies that the Ministry of Education uses today for when it talks about 21st century learning across the school system, right? So that was fascinating. And when I was at the Ministry of Agriculture, a big thing that I was able to do there was work to create a tax credit for farmers and food producers, so that if they donated stuff to a food bank or a student nutrition program, they would get a tax break. And that was amazing. I worked with the Ministry of Finance on that because they're involved with tax policy, and had to work with farmers and food producers and kind of work things out. But that's led to, probably millions and millions of pounds of food, that has been donated to food banks because of just that change in the code. So really amazing experiences. And even now, in the experience I have right now, things have come a bit full circle. I've overseen the agreement with the federal government for a new student nutrition program, for more money for the student nutrition program in Ontario. So we made a $108 million agreement with the federal government, which is going to lead to substantially more students getting food in the province, almost up to 1 million by the time I think we get to the end of the agreement. Other types of things, like when I worked at the Ministry of Multiculturalism, as founded the Ontario Corps, which is like a corps of volunteers that helps in emergencies of everyday Ontarians. So I think different experiences have brought to me, I've been able to have some meaningful results out of those different types of experiences that I've had. And as well, I've learned to grow in different ways because of those experiences. Different ministries have different cultures. And so you learn from those different cultures. Some things are good, some things are not so good. And so you kind of see the good and you kind of take that with you. And you kind of see the other stuff, you kind of leave that behind, or like, it's a good learning too, to know what doesn't work, and take that with you as well. So I think all those experiences have been really meaningful for me during the last 23 years in the Ontario Public Service.
Amazing. I mean, there's definitely meaningful for a lot of people. Like, for instance, you mentioned the breakfast for young students. I remember in my high school we had a breakfast, like guaranteed breakfast, and I ate there a couple times, but I knew students that had to do it every day, and so
Yeah.
well, thank you. We appreciate it. And yeah, also the food banks. I've had friends that have struggled a bit and have had to use food banks, and again, thank you for your contribution for that. Right. So I have another question now that we're heading towards the end of this podcast. So what advice would you give students that are trying to get into public services?
Yeah, so I get this question a lot. So I think first and foremost, first of all, public policy is, in my view, a set of skills, right? And you kind of take this set of skills with you wherever you go. Doesn't matter where you go. So you want to kind of focus on developing the skill set needed for public policy. And some of those skills involve, very good written communication, let's say, being able to take very complex ideas and make them very simple for people to understand. We're dealing with decision makers who aren't experts. And so we often have to take complexity and make it more simple for people. That's a big part of our work. One of the first managers I ever had in the Ontario government said, we're like translators. We have all this information coming at us. We translate it, make it simple, and then go to a decision maker and say, here's what the information we're bringing to you. Here's some of your options. And this is what the implications might be from the options, right? So part of it is that written communication, that oral communication, those types of skills, being able to think about research-based skills, evidence or data, because that's definitely a first step when it comes to people coming into the public service, or you're often asked to do that type of work to support the policy development process. So what I often tell people is I always advise them to go to the Ontario Internship website, program website, which still is there and has remained fairly consistent over the last 20 years, interestingly enough. But what they do is they have focus areas. And one of the focus areas that you can apply for is policy. So if you click on that, it'll give a really good sense of what are the skills and knowledge and kind of abilities that are being looked for when we say policy. And I think that's a very good starting point for people to kind of look through that list and say, okay, what are some of my things I already have? What stuff probably I have maybe some gaps in? And then how can I start to fill some of those gaps? And you can start to do that as a student. Like you don't necessarily have to be working working in student government or working in a committee or a council or doing some research or those things, all those count towards your skill set. And so you're able to start developing, even as a student, those skills right from the beginning. There's no expectation you're going to come into public policy and be like a professional public policy person right from day one, right? But people want to see, do you have the skill set and do you have the capacity and you have the ability to be able to grow into the role? And so that's my advice, is start looking at the skill sets, start looking at what's there, and then start thinking about what do I have and what could I get? And how can I get that? Is it through volunteer work? Is it through paid work? Is it through other things I do in my community? Like those are all good opportunities to think about as you're making your way forward and developing your resume, even as a student. And then I would say that as you kind of get closer to perhaps graduating and thinking about that next step, and public policy is what you want to do, recognizing that it's in a number of different places. So I've talked about the Ontario Public Service, but as I said before, there's regions, there's municipalities. But there's also, not-for-profits. There's also agencies. There's also like agencies as in crown corporations and stuff like that do public policy work or type of work. There's also, think tanks, right? And then, of course, there's even on the private sector side, there's consulting. People do business consulting. In the case of the public service, they do public sector consulting. We have often hire consulting firms to do reports for us, and those types of things. So you can look to a variety of different places, again, with the mind frame of what skills do I need to develop and where can I find places to do that. So I would say that then kind of broadens your scope of view about where you want to go in terms of public policy. The other thing is I often say to people is that, yeah, you might want to do a very particular thing in public policy. Like you're like, oh, I'm really interested in this topic. But I often tell them, like, just think about getting your foot in the door first and then growing your skill set and your resume and then moving from there to where you think you might want to go. And you might actually find along the way, you actually find other things that you never thought were going to be interesting to you that were actually fascinating to you. So, and the reality is you might get to the place you want to go and realize it's not as great as you thought it was, right? So, enjoy the journey, learn from it, grow yourself, get the skill set you need, keep building yourself out, and then you can take the time and move to where you think might be more interesting to you. But at least if you get your foot in the door, you're starting to move in that direction. So I often tell people to kind of get your foot in the door in any way you can. And often with most organizations, that opens you to like the internal postings that are there as well. So that's really something kind of a big advantage of kind of getting your foot in the door, no matter what the position is. So that's some of the advice I would give. And then the other thing I would say, and depending on kind of who's watching this podcast, people in the Ontario Public Service come from every walk of life. They didn't come from poli-sci. In fact, probably if you counted all the people up in the Ontario Public Service that came from poli-sci, it's probably a really small number. The people coming from every field. The public service has scientists in it. It has inspectors in it. It has frontline workers in it. It has almost any field you can think about. People have come. If you look at the Ministry of Health, a lot of the people came out of the medical field. Some of them are doctors, medical doctors, right? They're doing public policy. Or they're biologists, and they've done research in labs, and now they're working for the Ontario government. So it is really open to everybody. It's not I've had past bosses who said, like, if you tell me what you do, I can probably find you a job in the public service based on your skill set. So it's not a very narrow field. It's not people with just public policy backgrounds who are coming into government and doing public policy. It is people from many different backgrounds. And so even if you want to move through your field and do something first, and then kind of work within your field up into public policy, that's another avenue. And it does not take away in any way from ultimately getting into the public service.
Thank you very much, Ziyaad, for joining us and talking about your overall experiences. It was very insightful, especially the last part where keeping your options open, because I think especially most students in political science, like myself and Miguel, we sometimes think, I guess, that we're narrowed. Most of my friends, whenever I say political science, they're like, "Oh, are you going to be a lawyer?" So like there's a specific understanding that your job career path is quite stricted.
Mm-hmm.
So it was great to hear about this advice from someone within the field itself.
Yeah,
and
you so
you
much
also
for
came
coming.
from the sorry, Katie.
No, I was just thanking him for coming and to advising all of us. I mean, to be honest, I'm really glad that you came because, for me, there's been a limited amount of advice that I've received in my time at UTM relating to political science. Maybe I haven't showed up to enough political science panels, but yeah, this is extremely informative, even though I'm in my later years of university. So definitely, I'll personally keep a lot of this in mind. So thank you. Keep going, Selma. Sorry.
No, it's okay. So yes, you talked about your UTM experiences and then how you developed from that, and then distinguishing between partisan and nonpartisan engagement. So yes, before we end the podcast, I want to ask a question. What's your favorite go-to coffee shop? Because we'd love to get you a gift card as a thank you for coming to this podcast, as a thank you from the Model Parliament Club.
Wow, I really appreciate that. I'll have to think about that and get back to you. How's that?
Yeah,
I will do that.
sounds
But
great.
I appreciate that for sure. And I appreciate the time. I think that what you guys are doing is really important. As you said, students don't necessarily get as much information right from the beginning, and so it's very hard for them. And so they're trying to plan for like very limited careers, and maybe if those don't pan out or they find they're not interested, then they're just kind of wondering what's next. And I'm here to say there's a lot of realm for there's a lot of possibility out there. You just have to kind of know where to look for it. So hopefully, if I'm able to help at least one person kind of get in the right direction, I would have accomplished my goal. But yeah, no, thank you for the chat. I really appreciate it.